Welcome to our National Conversation, a podcast in which we discuss politics from all angles. We are completely nonpartisan, and all views, respectfully stated, are welcome here. Our podcast is unique in that it is hosted and run by students who are focused on finding solutions to the biggest problems facing America.
Welcome to our National Conversation. My name is Jeff Hall. I'm the founder and editor at ONC, which is what we call ourselves for short. We're a nonpartisan media outlet being built by student interns from all across America. We pride ourselves on our civility, so in this podcast, you're not going to hear name-calling or shouting. We all get along great. We love Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, Greens, everybody. So we are now 3 weeks after the election. Today is November 26th, and we've already recorded one session with a group of MAGA-like conservatives. We did another one with liberals last week. And today we are meeting with some folks who self-identify as either moderate or independent or centrist. Everybody has a little bit of a different wrinkle. And with that, I think we should go around the room and introduce ourselves, take about a minute max each. I'll start and show you how easy it is. I'm Jeff Hall. I'm an old newspaper guy going way back, worked at the Kansas City Star, the LA Times. I started some local community newspapers here in West LA. And in the last year or two, actually almost 4 years now, we've been working on our National Conversation, which is our attempt to create a neutral platform where all voices are welcome. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Thomas because he's been with ONC from the beginning.
So my name is Brian Thomas. I'm originally from Minnesota. I live in Pittsburgh. I'm a physician, medically trained oncologist. Been involved with ONC for the last couple of years as a policy advisor. Previously, I've been involved in Republican politics over the past few years. My politics has stayed steady. I think the country has drifted to the extremes. I view myself as a moderate conservative, and I'm happy to help with the discussions today. Thank you.
Yes, hi, I'm Aiden Merrill Skoloff from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm former director of content creation at Our National Conversation. Had the lovely opportunity to work with Jeff when we were first starting up. I have an educational background in political science from Skidmore College. I have a plethora of experience working on campaigns in upstate New York as well as here in Massachusetts. I'm currently the fundraising coordinator for State Senator Jamie Eldridge here in Massachusetts. And I'm excited to talk about politics with you guys.
I'm Cindy Brown. I'm right outside of Atlanta, and I have pretty much considered myself a moderate Republican, although I have voted for a couple of Democrats, and I would go to libertarians more often if I could. That tends to be a go-to for me when I'm really unhappy with what some Republicans are doing. But I consider myself really reasonable, and I like having conversations about this stuff.
Yeah, so my name is Sam Taylor. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer at Our National Conversation. I'm also a student at Brigham Young University studying political science. I'm wrapping up my degree now, and then we'll be moving on to law school. I've done, internships with the Utah State Legislature. I've also worked as a staff editor for BYU's undergraduate Journal of Philosophy, and just wrapped up a thesis in political theory for my undergraduate degree. And as far as, what my politics are, I'd say I'm an independent who's just a hodgepodge of a bunch of different things that's all quite malleable, or a lot of it's quite malleable. I'm still exploring, kind of where I fit into a number of political issues, what I really believe. Socially, in terms of social policy, I tend to be fairly progressive, though with, wrinkles in a number of issues where I think conservatives can bring up some good points. Otherwise, I'm really just looking to have a lot of conversations on this stuff to really try to get other people's perspectives and, better cement where I stand on a lot of these topics.
Hi, so I'm a nationally syndicated columnist for about 24 years now, most of that time at the Washington Post Writers Group, most recently Creator Syndicate. I do video commentary for a company called Straight Arrow News, and I have a podcast called Ribbon in the Center. I'm in the center politically. Different than my friend Jeff, I don't necessarily love Republicans or Democrats. In fact, after 35 years of covering politics, I look at the parties and I really can say I hate them both. And oftentimes cannot tell them apart. So that's where I am politically. And I'm interested in new media, digital media, finding audiences where they are. I have a newsletter at Substack in addition to my column. So that's what I'm interested in, speaking across the generational lines. And I've been mentoring some folks here at ONC for a while now.
I am Tanya Ruedas Ortiz. I got my undergraduate degrees in political communication at the University of Laverne, and I'm currently getting my master's in public policy at the University of California, Riverside. I am concentrating in data analytics, so just the math side behind policy, which is particularly relevant coming now with this new policy that's going to be coming out within the Trump administration. I would, define myself politically as, just cynical. I have doubts and concerns about both conservatives and liberals. I think, they're inconsistent, too inconsistent for me to even call myself a fan of them. So I would just say I'm cynical moderate. Not wishy-washy, but, critical about what they're telling me and what's actually being done.
Yeah, so hello, my name is Gabriel Cote. I am the current editorial co-lead here at ONC. I was a former fact-checker and moderate writer intern at ONC. I'm currently getting my master's degree in political research. Actually, my memoir will be about the electoral performances of the House Freedom Caucus members. So I always found myself a moderate because I think in the last few years we're seeing both political parties getting more and more polarized. So the Democratic Party more on the left, the Republican Party more on the right, but I never got the hang of any of them. I'm still stuck in the middle, if I may say it like that. So that's why I consider myself a moderate.
My liberal friends think I'm very conservative. My conservative friends find me very liberal. I think of myself as a moderate, but I often find myself having to explain myself. What does it mean to be a moderate? I've got some answers that I've come up with to try to justify my existence, but let's open it up to you guys first. When you think of yourself as being a moderate or a centrist or an independent, what does that mean?
Well, for me, it's always meant just being able to listen to both sides, even if you might lean one way or the other on certain issues. Being able to hear and understand the perspectives of different aspects of an issue, I think, is really important, regardless of how you self-identify politically. But particularly as someone who identifies as a moderate, I've always found it important to listen to alternate perspectives to mine and to try to understand, even if it really goes against what I believe in, why someone else might believe what they believe. And if I can find a way to understand and validate their understanding of the world.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think for me it means learning before I have my own opinions, learning about getting information from both sides, gathering information, and then formulating my own opinion versus echoing an opinion that I've heard, even if I agree with it naturally, instead of echoing it, learn about the other side so that I can defend my position if I still agree with the first one. But essentially making sure that I have considered both sides before I, spew out an opinion on it.
Yeah,
I think we each have our unique stories in life, right? So we have people who are farmers and laborers in the Midwest. We have individuals who are businessmen in New York City. We have people who are doctors, lawyers. Doesn't really matter what your beliefs are. It's the idea that we are heard and the idea that we can find a triangulated strategy to find a better way for everyone. And it's a win-win positive environment, which we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick with this. For me, a moderate just means solutions, right? It's just unrealistic for me to really believe that an answer to a certain social problem exists on one side of the spectrum. It's just unrealistic. And I believe there needs to be a meshing of everything. So maybe people who look at moderates may define them as someone who has beliefs that are, labeled as liberal or labeled as both conservative, right? But it's for me, it's more so just an ideology that wants solutions rather than just fighting.
Ruben?
So it means three things. To echo some of what's been said, for me, it means you identify the extremes on the right and the left, and you run as fast as you can away from both. That you turn away from the extremes on the far right or the far left. Secondly, it means that you don't, to echo what was just said, I don't think that either party has a monopoly on good ideas, that one party is 100% right and the other party is 100% wrong. I can see the value in both parties. I see the ineptitude, incompetence, and corruption in both parties as well. And lastly, it means being a cafeteria voter. When I lived in Texas, you have the option in Texas, be you Democrat or Republican, to vote a straight ticket. You just hit a button and you vote the whole ballot. So imagine having it that easy, where they make it easy for you, where you can vote every single Democrat on the ticket or every single Republican on the ticket. And the parties want it that way. I don't have that option. I don't do it that way. I might vote for a Democrat for governor and a Republican for lieutenant governor. And all the way down, I'm a cafeteria voter. So for me, it means those three things. To be rooted in the center is to run away from the extremes, to not believe that any party has a monopoly on wisdom and the right answers, and to vote like a cafeteria voter.
You know, some of my friends say America is so divided that nobody could possibly be a moderate. And that if you are a moderate, that means you're either really dumb because you can't figure out where you stand, or you're very wishy-washy because you're just confused all the time, or maybe you're actually quite intelligent because you are taking the time to investigate all the issues from all angles. So I don't know. I mean, do we have a right to exist? I mean, who are we, and why is it we have so little voice in America these days?
The media is to blame. I'll say that as a member of the media. We've generated this kind of crossfire dynamic where we want Rachel Maddow on the far left, Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson on the far right. There's not a whole lot of appetite for people in the middle. When we can watch CNN and see a Republican and a Democrat fight it out, that people tune into that. So the media is a big driver in the kind of division and polarizing that we've experienced. Your friends who say that are wrong on both counts. We're not dumb. In fact, I was just saying on an earlier interview I did today that I have some really smart friends who are locked into a Republican frame of mind. And they have Harvard degrees and advanced degrees and are really intelligent, but they only use half their brain because they use the right half. And then I have friends on the left who only use the left half of their brain. I have had well-meaning people tell me that they only watch MSNBC because they don't trust anything else. They think everything else is too far right-wing. I've had well-meaning people say the opposite. I only watch Fox News. When I watch both, when I'm able to take any issue and look at it from a 360 perspective, it makes me automatically the smartest person in any room. I'm the smartest person in any room when politics is the topic because all my smart friends are divided up into two camps. And as such, when I hear them speak, they tell the story sunny side up. Their party's doing everything right. The other party's doing everything wrong. And then they flip the switch, and that's how it works. I'm able to see both, and because of that, I'm smarter than anybody else in the room if that's the topic. And also, in terms of being weak, there's a slogan on the DMZ that separates North and South Korea. The U.S. troops that are stationed there and have been for over 60 years, the slogan is ready to fight tonight. Ready to fight tonight. And so I'm usually the strongest person in any room because I fight all the time. Because I fight with the left and I fight with the right. And I don't have a cave to go into. When Ann Coulter on the right throws a bomb, she can run into her cave and her tribe will protect her. And when somebody on the left, like Rachel Maddow, throws a bomb, she can go into her cave on the left and her lefty friends will protect her. I have no one protecting me. I don't have a cave to go to. I don't have a tribe. So I have to fight all the time, fight with my right and my left, and so I'm equally strong with both hands.
We're jumping ahead here, but is there a cave that could be built? Is it a third party, or is it a brand new media outlet? Is it our national conversation? Where is there a safe space for moderates so they don't get beaten up from both sides?
Well, for me, if I may talk, when I follow the news, where I go is mostly AP News or Reuters, because from what I see is they are showing both sides while being the most as neutral as possible. But of course, it's impossible that a news media outlet being 100% neutral. It's impossible. The country is too polarized at the moment, even though there are some common grounds, I believe, in the country. But it's so difficult to find these common grounds, or it's not necessarily politically viable, I think, for the moment for any party to be as compromising with the other party as possible. I think we are seeing, if I can take a bit more time also, that the different coalitions in both parties are disappearing. I don't know if you ever heard of the Blue Dog Democrats, but there are not many anymore. So I do believe that what we're seeing is that the middle part where we are, the moderates, are a bit disappearing because it's not really politically viable. And I do believe that ONC has a mission to at least give a voice to any people that wants to be moderate, to be a bit more neutral, to be between these two, this polarized area. I think it's important, and it needs to be upfront.
Brian?
Well, I think too that the media is a business, and they're in the business of keeping half of the country angry. And if half the country's angry, it creates news. And being in the middle and not wanting to anger people and work with all of that ire, it's not as popular. It's not as popular of a thing per se. News is polarizing, and that's where that's where the money is, essentially, because people get angry and talk about it, and I think that's why it's harder for us to break in as a neutral site.
Well, are moderates just fundamentally boring?
Maybe it's not as entertaining, because most of news is infotainment. It's not news. I don't let my husband call it Fox News. I say, you can put Fox on, but don't call that news. And that it's in the same with all the channels, you know what I mean? But it is infotainment that people are watching when they think they watch the news. So maybe moderates need to come up with a way to do infotainment, and that would be probably with debates. And debates can be heated and still be respectful. They can be passionate and still be respectful. And they don't have to be boring.
Sam,
I think the difficulty,
the idea of the three-way debates that you and your team have been talking about.
I could talk about that. I do think Brian was trying to speak there for a little bit, so I'll give some of my time to Brian if you had something to say.
Thank you. The difficulty with moderates inserting themselves into the modern political debate lies in the rules of how elections are dictated, correct? So with first past the post or winner take all voting systems, you're going to get a two-party system no matter how hard and how much money you give to an independent candidate. Each state, it requires tens of thousands of signatures to get even on a ballot. And that said, it takes a massive amount of resources in order to get elected into office. So in the current game of politics, moderates have a role with their fortitude and strength to be people who are peacemakers and peacekeepers and individuals who can help to bring data and help to bring emotional stability into debates that I think otherwise need to be had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just to kind of build off of what Brian was saying there, and then to answer your I'll get to your other question in just a moment, Jeff. But I think that there are a number of levels at which something like political moderation could operate. One, you think about like operating at the institutional level, the level of elections and so forth. That level, I'm skeptical of how well political moderation is going to apply, to that level in our current environment. Where I think political moderation, however we define it, can succeed would be on the individual level and on like kind of elements of the group or coalition building level that exists outside of the electoral sphere. The individual level, and this is going back to some of our earlier discussions of how exactly do we define moderation. For me, it's a sort of like, I guess, a willingness to engage in a lot of self-criticism, with any convictions that you hold, beliefs you have, except maybe, certain bright line areas like basic democratic principles, opposition to bigotry, that sort of thing. But within those lines, I think it's really being willing to, kind of push back on whatever you're currently tending towards, to really dig into the research, et cetera. And I think that if we can do that, we'll promote a more responsible citizenry, even if our political institutions are necessarily quite partisan.
I just want to make a point.
Sorry, go ahead.
In the current last 4 presidential elections, if you look at the candidate elected, Obama, Trump, subtract Biden and go back to Trump, you're talking about movements and not really extremes, but movements in individual parties that have dictated who's been the winner of these elections. And so, predominantly in these elections, the moderate candidate ended up losing in the alternative party. You can go back to John McCain, Mitt Romney, Hillary Rodham Clinton. I mean, you can go through that history. And so it just becomes an interesting dynamic of how to win in the current first past the post system. You have to cater to the extremes to get a movement and enough people in your own party to end up getting out the votes in order to prevail from the very end.
Yeah. And to then I guess respond to your earlier question, Jeff, and then we'll just let other people speak. But I think, when we're talking about the sort of debates, and Cindy kind of mentioned this earlier as well, I think that's probably one of the best mediums for some sort of political moderation to become very apparent and succeed. Because there's really, in my mind, there's 2 ways that you can do debates. Either they can be used in a performative way to score partisan points, right, which is what we tend to see represented in the media, or, and not necessarily, less entertaining, they can be just in-depth, substantive, very respectful. That doesn't mean that there's a lack of passion, but we're really getting into the issues and really trying to understand what the other side's saying and even push back against it, but doing that in a respectful way that's more exploratory than, having a predetermined conclusion and just trying to defend it at all costs. I think that there's a potential for that sort of, I guess, way of doing political discussions to still be interesting, to still be fiery, without devolving into the partisan spat that we see regularly. So I don't think that moderation is necessarily boring. And I think these sorts of debates, that we've been referring to could be a way to, I guess, get moderation removed from that label.
Just so everybody will know what we're talking about, Sam is our COO, and he leads a team of about 90 students, literally coast to coast, and we all meet every week on Zoom, and we use Slack, and it's quite a far-flung operation, but somehow it hangs together. And they're always brainstorming ideas on, how to get the word out about our national conversation. And one idea that Sam and his team had is to have a 3-way debate where you'd have one person take the position on the left, one person on the right, and then one person in the middle, and then they would go at it. And we try to keep it relatively short for TikTok consumption, or we could remove sound bites and put them into a TikTok format. And maybe we just let it go for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and let them really get into it. The students do a really good job of research, and they go deep on the issues. In fact, one of the things our students did early on when we first got started is we literally wrote a book called Let's Fix America. Hey, there you go, Brian. And inside this book, we have 34 different policy proposals that the students put together. I never told them what they could or could not write. I just said to them, before you write anything, please talk to a nice mix of liberal, moderate, and conservative experts. And they did. They took the assignment very seriously, and then they came up with their proposals, which in my view are very common sense, very practical, very moderate, very cost effective. That was one of the things we looked at, is how do we do this without running up the deficit? So I think it can be done. I'm not sure yet how to make this exciting, and that's one of our challenges. Tanya, are you raising your hand here?
Yeah, I am. Something I really want to note is that on this why moderates aren't securing places of power, really pushing this idea of solutions. Obviously, what Brian said is true. It's hard even getting on the ticket. It's very hard to find acceptance for moderate, but I also feel like moderates are just not confrontational. They already understand they're at odds. So then when it comes to actually being the conversation, they think, maybe not. And maybe that's just me being critical of Gen Z moderates, right? They just don't want to give it the time. So then you have to figure out how to get these people motivated for them to recognize they do have power within this political structure, even if they don't typically align with Democrats or liberals. And maybe that starts with our national conversation forming this identity of what it means to really be American. Because I feel like we've forgotten that, what it means to be American now. Because it used to be what we can do for America, what we can do for each other. And now it's become what I can do for myself. How can I secure myself in this society? So we moved to this individualistic type of living, which isn't doing us any good. It's actually making us go extreme left or extreme right because that brings us that so-called identity. But I feel like maybe in us having the space at our national conversation where we could express that there is a solution that exists. It is not being wishy-washy. It's just wanting to have data-driven solutions. Maybe this can form a new American identity, the new Americana, I guess you could call it, where it's focused on, actually building America better and actually getting things moving forward. And, I am a particular fan of independent parties. I love the Forward Party. I think what they're doing makes a lot of sense. And they're so critical, even of themselves, but also about the left and right. And I think that's where we ought to be moving towards. I'm so for a conversation on moving away from the binary nature that is American politics. No more left nor right, just common sense.
By the way, if anybody wants to just raise your hand and I'll see it.
Yeah, so, there's a part of me that so deeply wants what Tanya just said to be true, and to see a path forward for Americans and our political parties to figure out how to work together. But I've always been struck by the evident truth of path dependency, which is the theory in social sciences that past events really constrain future potential events. And with the hyper polarization we've seen, I don't think that there's any incentive for that to stop. In fact, if anything, there's an incentive for that to continue to grow and for people's echo chambers to continue to get less and less pervaded by other ideas. And unfortunately, I think without some sort of radical revolution, and I'm not saying anything even necessarily violent, but just some sort of serious event or whatever to really reframe everything, I don't necessarily see a way in which moderate ideas become politically viable. I think that, unfortunately, the direction the country is going, extremism is going to become more and more prevalent. And I do think that it is important for spaces like this to exist, for people to discuss, to come together, for moderates to feel like they have a voice. And I think in academic settings such as this, there is space for that. I think on the national stage, I think in federal politics and even many state politics, the desire for moderate voices is not high enough to really encourage candidates to run on a moderate platform.
Now, I mean, if you look at just political science with Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, it talked about how high civic participation was in the United States 50, 60, 70 years ago. And where has that gone today? Instead, we've decided to become individually non-confrontational. We've decided to join tribes. We've decided to get protection within our tribes. And only the few people who run for office actually decide to speak out. The masses don't. The masses do not participate. I think in order to change the current environment, you have to encourage what Thomas Jefferson really wanted was an enlightened society of people who were educated and willing to ask the tough questions and willing to participate in the civic virtues of America.
So earlier this year, No Labels tried to put forth a unity ticket. They wanted to have one Republican and one Democrat at the top of the ticket. And I don't know if you guys read this article that just came out recently. I'm guessing Ruben did because he's an even junkier news junkie than I am. But they said the Democrats just came out with all guns a-blazing to make sure No Labels was never going to stand a chance. I mean, some pretty ugly stuff. Ruben, tell us what was going on there.
So, Jeff, I heard about this story about 24 hours ago. And there's a summary in my email, one of the Substack newsletters from Matt Taibbi. And literally, this just came in about an hour ago. The Democrats' Dirty Tricks Playbook. Documents just made public show how groups aligned with the Democratic Party hit a third-party rival, No Labels, with an array of underhanded schemes that put Watergate tricksters to shame. And what this basically lays out was the Democrats were, before Kamala Harris became the nominee, they were stuck with Joe Biden. They were nervous about Joe Biden being the nominee. They thought they were going to lose to Donald Trump. And the last thing they wanted was any kind of third-party challenge. And whether that took the form of Robert Kennedy, who was then started off as a Democrat, running in the Democratic primary a long time ago, then became an independent, or whether it was no labels, they decided they were the enemy. So they came at no labels with a kind of fury that if you're a Democrat, you kind of wish they had had that kind of fury when it came time to go after Donald Trump, right? In their mind, no labels was the enemy, not Donald Trump, the Republican Party. And so for those people who want a third party or want a third party option, this news breaking tells you that this did not happen by accident. No labels was there, then it wasn't. It was going to run a ticket, then it didn't. And behind the scenes, unbeknownst to a lot of people, it was these Democratic dirty tricks on the left that, great job. Smart people in politics, right? You sometimes think the smartest people enter politics because this was so bright that they ended up helping elect Donald Trump. In their mind, they may have thought they were actually helping themselves. And in return, they took a big chunk of the electorate and just turned them off. So they're wondering, where did those extra 5 million people go? Why? If you look at the vote totals, why are the vote totals lower now than they were in 2020? The Republicans have an answer. They say that in 2020, the whole thing was rigged. There were all these fake ballots that were put in there. But I don't believe that. I believe that 5 million people just said, forget it. Forget it. I'm not voting. I'm not voting for either party. There are no choices. I'm sick of having no choices. And so the Democratic Party cut its own throat.
So we're 3 weeks after the election now, and it seems like ancient history now, and everybody has analyzed this thing to death. But any commentary on what the Republicans did right or wrong, or what the Democrats did right or wrong, and any advice for how both parties ought to proceed as they go forward from here?
In a very specific way, I just lead with the Latino vote. I mean, that's something that people continue to marvel at. Very quickly, what the Democrats did wrong was assuming that Latino celebrities are going to decide how people vote. That I, as a Mexican-American in San Diego, am going to look to direction from Pitbull or Jennifer Lopez and Mark Anthony and decide because they tell me how to vote, I'm going to vote that way. Mistaking activists for the community, fixing labels like Latinx, which was cooked up in some Northeastern liberal lab, not listening to people, telling people what they should be voting for, overemphasizing the importance of immigration when Latinos care about the same things other people care about, including jobs and the economy. And here's the big one. They missed a great opportunity after the Madison Square Garden event, and you had on a Trump stage, you had a racist comedian making a racist joke about Puerto Rico and other groups. The Democrats didn't do what they do in corporate America. In corporate America, when Coors Beer in the 1970s made a mistake in offending Latinos, it created an opportunity, and Anheuser-Busch ran into that void. And they spent 10 times more than they'd spent before. They owned that market. They owned it for many, many decades. Several decades now, and now it's gone over to a different brewing company. But the point is, when your Coke and Pepsi stumbles, what Coke does is they seize that market, that opportunity. The Democrats didn't do that. What they did was they pointed to Madison Square Garden and said, all you Latinos, you have to vote for us. You have no choice. Look over there. Those guys over there are so racist. And that's not the way human nature works. All those Latinos, 16, 17 million, said, you know what? Next time, come back to us with something that you intend to do for me. How do you intend to address our concerns? How are you listening to us? And don't just say you have to vote for us because the other guys are so bad. So you had some really stupid liberals making dumb mistakes about a community they did not understand. And they ended up playing right into the hands of someone like Donald Trump.
Donald Trump did surprisingly well among white suburban women, I'm told. That was a bit of a surprise. We had a female candidate of color. It seemed like, in this DEI society we live in now, she was pretty well positioned to make a dramatic move, but either the country isn't ready for this, or maybe she didn't do a very good job as a candidate. Tanya, you're smiling.
Yeah, I mean, I refuse to think it's because she's a woman, because she's a woman of color. I think we're a bit more advanced than people think. I don't think that was the biggest focus out there, that she was a black woman or mixed race woman, or that she was a woman. I think it was because we just have lost overall trust in the Democratic Party. And this sudden flip from Biden to Harris was such a shock to so many Americans. Or maybe not a shock to us, but to a lot of people, it was still a shock. So I just think that created this sort of bad faith around her potential and the past administration. So I think it just came down to, who can be consistent and who is, a bit more trustworthy. And unfortunately, people saw it as Trump. Was that the best way to go? For me, as a Gen Z moderate, no. But that's, obviously I have the hopes that he does do well. Of course, I don't want him to fail because that means I fail. I want him to do good. I want him to prove it wrong. I want to prove that he could cooperate and get their solutions going. But yeah, I think it just came down to trust and this perception of whether or not she can be a reliable and consistent leader.
And you live in Massachusetts, and you've got a representative there, Seth Moulton, who basically is saying Democrats have gone too far on the trans issue, supporting people who were men or boys who want to transition to females and compete in female sports, and women feel like they're being put at an unfair advantage. And the Democrats seem to have rallied around this as a cause. But Seth Moulton is saying, come on, the country isn't quite ready for this. We're gonna keep losing if we keep pushing these types of platforms. What are you hearing from there?
So this is an issue I'm actually very ill qualified to speak on, so I'm going to say very little because I know when it's my place to speak and when it's not, and this is not really my place to speak. I think all I will say is my personal philosophy is live and let live. I don't really care how people want to live their lives, and so I'm a believer in freedom in that sense. There are niche issues, trans women in sports and that, there are definitely issues, and I understand where people are coming from. I think the only point I will say is that you are correct. I think it is an issue that, while it is really important, it is losing Democrats' elections. It is something that Republicans have focused on as an issue that they can really rally their base around. And unfortunately, I'm a student of election politics, which can be different than, policy politics. And while I think that there needs to be more liberal policies around this issue, when it comes to election politics, every time you focus on it, you're losing voters. And that's just the unfortunate truth of winning elections. Even if it's not the truth of what I think is right or how things should be, it is just the truth of how you win or lose elections.
Cindy and Brian, you're both raising your hand and nodding your head. Cindy, we'll start with you.
Aiden, that was really well said. Very well said. I think it is certainly a very important topic, but not necessarily an election topic. And getting back to where we were leading into that, as a older white moderate woman with a lot of friends that run in the same party there, not being a Trump fan, I woke up every day waiting for Harris to give me a reason to vote for you. Give me something. I woke up with an open mind. I listened. I wanted to be able to vote for her. And when it came down to it, I couldn't do it. And I voted Libertarian because I couldn't vote for Trump. But it was, and so I do know a lot of my Republican friends were the same way and did vote for Trump as moderates that did not want to vote for him, but preferred the economics, mostly the more conservative agenda. So I think he got a lot of moderates that 6 months earlier did not think they'd be able to vote for him, but when push came to shove, they did. I have a lot of friends that did, and it's not because they like Trump at all. It's that I couldn't find a reason to switch.
Now, my Republican friends, the MAGA people, and you'll see this when you see their session, they love Trump. Absolutely love him. Think he's just the best thing ever. So you're saying some people don't like Trump. Why do they not like Trump?
Oh, mainly because of his ethics, his morals, his intolerant. Not that I don't think he's prejudiced. I don't think he's some of the things that he gets called, but I think he thinks he knows it all, and I'm not sure he surrounds himself by the best advisors, as would be evident by the last couple of weeks. I feel like he's too stubborn and pig-headed in his own thinking, and the morals and the ethics are a big thing. And so no, I do know a lot of people that do not like him at all that voted for him, and I do know a lot of people that like him a lot.
Right.
So I live in the largest Rust Belt state and battleground state in the entire country, Pennsylvania. I live in Washington County. I currently reside in Allegheny County. I was part of the Republican Party leadership back before the 2016 election. And I can tell you that a lot of the politics is decided by the 70% versus 30% cultural warfare between the educated and uneducated, where a lot of the elites think they can dictate the issues. And the reality shows that, there's a much more dynamic in terms of culture going on. And so with what happened between being a predominantly blue county, Washington County, for several election cycles up until 2016 and 2020 and 24, what happened is they had a massive Republican operations game at the county level, which converted a lot of the precinct positions to being filled and no longer vacated, where they had ground game number one. Number two, they had a messenger that tapped into the Reagan Democrats and effectively catered into this male machismo concept, and going on Joe Rogan, having Barron Trump, and cater to these untapped demographics and male voters, I think had a huge deal with this, because I think what happened is a lot of the Democratic vote was already saturated within the suburbs and within the urban areas. So this is an election. There's a lot, I think, to learn from. I think there's a lot that both parties can hopefully become part of a solution to matters. But ultimately, enough of this whole, taking sides and so forth. And we need to figure out how we can develop solutions where both parties are involved.
Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Trump does not try to remain in the White House after his second term is over, and that we go back to a two-party battle. Are there any rising stars on either side that anybody here looks up to and can think of as being potentially a great president?
Well, being a great president, I still don't know, but I think a rising star in the Republican Party is Vivek Ramaswamy. I think he's very young. He represents the younger generations, because we saw that young white men are more and more conservative and voting in that way. And I do believe that Vivek Ramaswamy is really representing this generation, and he will be working with Elon Musk in the government efficiency department. So he already has a big job. He has a big mandate, if I can say it like that, in the Trump administration. And what's really good is he's going to be mentored by Musk. He will be mentored also by Trump. So I do think that they are placing him in great places so that he can have a great career for the rest of his life.
I do think that, I was just saying to my husband, I agree totally with that. I tried to get behind him early on in the primaries, but kind of felt like he wasn't quite ready. And I was just saying, that this position is either going to make him or break him. He's either going to be a rock star, or it's going to eat him up, and he's going to end up not being in the political scene afterwards. So I think it's going to be interesting. But there was just 4 of the priorities of Doge were listed on the news, and all 4 were priorities that would not have a negative effect on any hardworking Americans. And I heard a Democratic response to it was, yeah, that's fine, but what if they touch Medicaid and Medicare? Well, nobody was talking about Medicaid and Medicare. They were talking about $1 trillion worth of initiatives that would not have a negative effect on one American that's a hardworking person, but the negative response to it just can't go away. What if that's not what we're talking about here? We're talking about the 4 initiatives they put forth. So I do agree with Gabriel, though, that I think Vivek's going to be someone to watch. No.
Aiden, anybody on the Democratic side that you can think of?
Unfortunately, no. I have people who I'm a fan of, but no one who I necessarily believe has the potential to win a national election. I love Pete Buttigieg, but I don't think he has a shot at winning the presidential election. And yeah, unfortunately, there's just no one in the political sphere right now that I think I or anyone who I speak to in my age group is particularly excited about on either side of the aisle.
Sam,
unless you're a hardcore Trump fan.
Yeah, Sam, how's the view from Utah?
To be perfectly honest, Jeff, I couldn't really tell you. I think that for the past little while, I've just been very absorbed in kind of the current events, the goings on of the election, etc. But I don't really follow individual politicians thoroughly, like celebrities or something like that. I expect I probably should, but I mean, really, I'm just very interested to see on kind of a broader level how the ideological makeup of America shifts, following Trump's presidency. Are we going to see lasting effects of this sort of, right-wing populism that Trump seems to embody? What's the response going to be like on the left, etc.? And I'd imagine that would have profound influences on whoever is going to be the next, rising star in either party. But that's about all I can say on that front.
Ruben.
For me, I think if we're talking about the Democratic side, I heard from time to time the name Jeff Jackson, who was state representative at North Carolina and has now won the general election for being Attorney General of the state. So I do believe that he may be a great candidate in 4 years, but his political career is still very young. And some people are already talking about Harris running a second time in 2028. I'm not sure of that. 4 years is a long time in the political landscape, but I do think that Jeff Jackson may be a great alternative for the Democratic Party if they do not have another candidate, because I do think Pete Buttigieg really performed well. I think it was in Iowa during the primaries in 2020, but I think the United States is not necessarily prepared for someone like Pete Buttigieg to lead the country or being a presidential candidate. So we'll need to see in 4 years to be a bit more credible on that end for the Democratic Party.
So on the Democrats, you have so much chaos now because of Trump on the ballot, 3 successive presidential elections. And then on the Democratic side, you have somebody who was vice president, and before that was a senator. All that's creating an appetite for a governor. So the fact that you're a governor via Republican or Democrat is going to play well for you in the future. On the Democratic side, you'll hear from 4 different governors. Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, Gavin Newsom from California, and Wes Moore from Maryland. All those same 4 names you heard before that never got into the running because there was no Democrat primary. One of the reasons the Democrats lost, they had no primary. The names that would have been in that primary will now be in the front for 2028. On the Republican side, I've only got one governor on my list, and that's Glenn Youngkin from Virginia, who wants that and who's in a fair position to compete for it. But aside from him, you'll have J.D. Vance, who thinks he's the heir apparent, who is already thinking it's his. Marco Rubio, who wants to come up from Secretary of State to run for president. And someone like, kind of as a dark horse, Elise Stefanik, who's going to be our UN ambassador. If she gets promoted to Secretary of State, which sometimes happens for UN ambassador, if something happens with Rubio, then it'll put her in a position to run. But you won't hear some of those old names. You won't hear Harris. You won't hear Haley. You won't hear Florida Governor DeSantis. You won't hear that name again. You won't. And so some of those people in both parties have now been banished. They don't have the power to raise money anymore because they gave it a shot and they weren't very impressive.
Is there any chance for a third party in America?
Well, you said we just talked about what happened, right? I mean, your question hinges on, can you get the political parties to play nice, to not invoke Watergate-style dirty tricks to try to kneecap any kind of third-party option? It's not really up to us to decide whether a third party is permissible. It's whether the other parties, the 2 major parties, will allow it and permit it.
You have to look historically, Jeff, at the elections where third-party candidates were in a major run for the presidency. 1912 with TR, and how he became a spoiler candidate for the Republican Party, where Woodrow Wilson becomes president. look at just the 1992 election with Bush, Clinton, and Perot, and how the third-party candidate became a spoiler candidate. So I think a lot of the country doesn't have an appetite for that situation to happen, and I think there needs to be drastic changes in the rules of the game for a third party to be viable.
Yes, and I do think that. I just believe that the third parties in the elections, they mostly run on only one issue. If I remember correctly, George Wallace in the 60s, it was a lot about it was the more southern voices that the Americans wanted to hear in the general elections. He won a few states. I think he won Alabama and other more southern states, but it was not politically viable to win a general election. I think it was similar with Ross Perot when they were talking about the free trade issue in the United States. So I believe that just to get there, a third party needs a single issue, and then this single issue needs to be the center of a general mobilization in the country. And this is very difficult because after that, they will try to take ideas from other parties just to try to be in the debate of the various other issues. And this is very difficult because you also need a lot of money to campaign in the whole country. So for now, unless we have a major electoral reform, I do not think it's viable for a third party to actually win a presidential election.
I mean, who is the first and the last independent presidential candidate who won? George Washington, right? How many years has it been since he was elected president? You're talking about over 225 years. So there you go. It's very difficult to be in that position.
If moderates somehow could gain some control, maybe some coalition of somewhat moderate Republicans and Democrats got together and started working together, what kind of policies would you like to see this group come out with that would make America a better country? I mean, are there compromises that could be made? Let's say that liberals say to the Republicans, okay, you can have your wall on the southern border, but we're also going to get full-blown immigration reform as part of the deal. I mean, there are probably a lot of compromises like that could be made.
You're talking about the Senate, I think. I think you just described the Senate without moderation. I mean, it is a give and take. I'm not sure that they do that enough. It becomes my way or the highway. But just by nature of the fact that we were able to get the Attorney General proposed person out of the picture in 2 weeks shows some type of moderation going on somewhere.
America has a multiple choice test. It's called the prisoner's dilemma of political science. There's A, E, C, D. We always pick the worst possible choice, which gives us the worst possible outcome, rather than building up communication and trust to triangulate for the best possible, less painful decision of all of it. We do it time and time and time again, and that's the problem.
Moderates are supposed to be filled with common sense and have good solutions. I'm not hearing too many solutions right now. You guys are feeling a little beat up, it seems to me.
I held the book.
Yeah.
Go read it.
Okay.
So the way, Jeff, you might measure, success if you had moderates in charge in two ways. You take a look at the bread and butter issues people care about, jobs and the economy, and do better on that front and find more common ground on that front. Then the other hot button issues that divide us, it's impossible, I think, to declare victory if you haven't tackled those hot button issues. So a better common sense way on abortion, on guns, on immigration, and on trade, on those four issues. If you don't tackle those four issues, then you're pretty much letting the extremes have it, letting the demagogues have at it. So that's what I think a moderate approach would look like. Some more common sense. You can think of it as horse trading, give me a wall on the border and also immigration reform or however you want to do it, but just allowing for less politics, less extremism, and more common sense. And the same thing with guns. A sane policy on guns. It's not always a question of doing away with the Second Amendment or, everybody has a right to an AR-15.
it seems like gun control ought to be the easy one. Something like 85% of people on both sides agree that, people ought to go through background checks and that people with mental health issues or criminal backgrounds should not be allowed to have guns. It's the NRA or somebody who's pulling the strings here. It's got to be.
Yeah, the NRA is a powerful organization on that issue, and also we see that there are not really a lot of solutions that works 100% effectively. For example, in California, they have a UBC. They did a pilot project on that, and the crime rate with guns or the suicide rate with guns and everything, it did not, diminishes. It rose still. So we see that universal background check does not really work. We are seeing that some other, like the red flag laws, are getting a bit of traction, but at the same time, it's massive investments from the federal government. And, a lot of people in the States do not really like that the federal government, intervenes in federal affairs. So we see that it's difficult on that issue to where do we get help. So I do believe that it's a bit difficult to find like the perfect ground to arrive to a perfect situation. And we are the moderate. We're trying to find that perfect thing, but I think in politics there's nothing perfect actually. So that's why I think we have some solutions, but we're always beaten up saying, well, there's this and this and this issue with that solution, so we need to find another one that answers to that. But then other issues come back with another solution. So I think we're just spiraling a little bit when we're moderate and we're trying to find perfect policy solutions.
We have a Gen Z focus here at our national conversation. We're largely built by student interns. And when I observe them, they sometimes come across to me as being overwhelmed. They wonder if they're ever going to get a good job or own a home. They wonder if the political situation is ever going to become more accommodating of both sides. I mean, they have a lot of reasons for fear: climate change, gun shootings on campus, all the things that they've grown up with, social media. So the older people in the room, I'd like to ask you, any advice for the younger people that maybe would help give them some faith that something good is going to come out of all this? Any words of inspiration?
Yeah. I would say that, for those who are really upset about the election, to catch your breath, because how you're really going to be affected by it day to day in the next year is minimal to none. Don't lose your passion for those things that you're passionate about, that you may think you've lost if you're unhappy with the results of the election. Don't lose that passion and that interest, but don't overreact to how it's really going to affect you, because it's not in most cases. I said to one young person, I said, a year from now, you're going to be affected more by your county commissioner and your school board member than you will be by this presidential choice. And, again, don't lose the passion for the causes that you feel like you've lost, but catch your breath and have faith in the country, because, we're bigger than what one person can do in 4 years. And we've proven that over and over again. So, it's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all roses.
Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, the only way for a divided house to come together is start a conversation. And that means you need to step up and participate. And there's a lot that we can learn from each other in that process, but you can never learn from someone else unless you actually do. And so that's my advice to our generation, the future generations, is that get out there, be vocal, be friends, build bridges, meet everyone, meet all walks of life. People that make more money than you, less money than you, people who didn't go to college, people who do go to college with advanced degrees. It doesn't matter. People that believe in Buddhism, Catholicism, no religion, whatever it is. Our job is to understand people. And by doing that, then you can have a true conversation and bring positive change to our country.
Ruben, any advice to the younger generation?
Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, when I became aware of our national conversation, I agreed to serve as a mentor whenever I could. I had one goal, and that was to think about the way that my generation, Generation X, born in the 1960s, high school in the 1980s, The way we were maligned and insulted and mistreated and marginalized by baby boomers who had an incredibly high opinion of themselves and a low opinion of everybody else. And to do the opposite and to make sure that no matter what, I related to and tried to relate to Generation Z in a way that was much more welcoming than what I had to deal with and my generation had to deal with. And sometimes I succeeded and sometimes I failed because the Generation Z frustrates me. And it frustrates me because of the way it was brought up, of the way it was raised, of the impulses it was subjected to, the juices in which it's been marinating. It had to come of age, not just with school shootings, Jeff, but also with cancel culture. I never knew what that was, cancel culture. So when I run across some really smart members of Generation Z, and I can't gauge how smart they are because they will not express themselves, because they're afraid of offending somebody or offending some group or being marginalized or being canceled or whatever. And I'm a working journalist who's been in this game for 35 years, been fired 16 times. You know, this whole thing is foreign to me. It's like I'm dealing with people from Mars. The fact that you have smart people who won't express themselves because somebody might be offended. If I took that way of life, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning, right? How could I write a syndicated column if I was afraid of offending people? And so I have struggled with that. And I think that my advice to Generation Z would be, think about how you got to be this way, so cautious, so risk averse, so afraid, and unlearn all those bad habits. And yes, it's good to contemplate and to think and to see things from different points of view. But at some point, you got to get in the arena, and you got to take a shot. You got to get hit in the face. You got to hit somebody back in the face. And it's okay if you write a piece and they say, "Man, this is crap. You know, this is a terrible column, and you're raked over the coals for it." I'd rather have that than, gee, it took you a year to write one op-ed because you just wanted it perfect. You want it to be perfect. We never get to perfect, you know? And so I want them in the game. I want them in the arena, and I want them to learn how to take a punch in the face and give one back. And so that would be my hope, that they would learn to be more expressive and be more confident in what they have to say. And it's okay to fail, and it's okay to get things wrong. And it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to get fired. Go out and get fired a few times.
Okay, let's give Gen Z the final word. Aiden, let's start with you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ruben's sentiment that I think there is a lot of fear about speaking and the worry of being canceled. And I do think that's been very damaging to discourse. I think it has caused a lot of people to have knee-jerk reactions to things, especially more liberal Gen Zers, to have these very knee-jerk reactions to certain conservative ideas without actually understanding and thinking about the implications of what they're hearing. They just hear certain trigger words and snap opinions based on that. I think it's really important for people on both sides to stop forming opinions so quickly and to really consider the implications of various ideas. Consider, how they will affect different groups of people and not choosing which people are more important to them, because every single person in this country is equally important. And I think people from both sides tend to pick which groups they find to be important and base their opinions on that. And I think it is important for all of us to consider every group in this country, consider how our ideas are going to affect them, and try to come to solutions that benefit everyone rather than your chosen group.
Gabriel.
Yeah, so my first advice would be to get involved as much as possible. Ruben talked about like an op-ed that may take at least a year to write. When I was a moderate writer, I started writing bad op-eds. I'm coming from Quebec, so I mostly speak French. I only speak in English once or twice a week. So when I started writing for ONC, it was not very good. I had great ideas, but I did not know how to correctly write it and to put my emotions into it. And Ruben really helped me with that. And necessarily also I posted a lot of my articles on LinkedIn and everything, and I had great insights. I had great discussions with other interns, especially Ryan Jelani. I think Sam knows who I'm talking about. We had different perspectives or opinions on various issues, but we let each other talk to each other to talk about it and to understand better the other way. That's my other advice, is to let other people speak also, because if we are all going into our own bubble and only hearing our own advice, we cannot move forward as a country. So we really need to let others speak and to not fear of our own opinions. We also have our place in the debate. We also have our place in our opinions needs to be valued also. So that's my true advice. So get involved. Do not fear to say your own opinions, but also let others speak to understand them.
Sam, you're batting cleanup here.
All right. Well, we'll see how well I can do. I mean, I think there's kind of two bits of advice that have kind of really stuck with me. Mainly because they're not in contradiction per se, but they are in tension with one another. One element is, okay, you're young, you're still learning a lot of this stuff, etc. You like getting out there and kind of almost pretending like you know all of it. That's not the route to go. And so being kind of more reserved, being more exploratory. We've heard before, like this is just a tendency in moderates generally to really sit down and try to analyze the issues, really look at the evidence. That takes time, it takes energy. Not everyone has the time for that. And so that I think lends itself towards this sort of reservation, at least with moderates and especially for maybe moderate Gen Z individuals. On the other hand, as Ruben was mentioning, and as Gabe echoed, etc., it's just getting in there, expressing yourself, getting your ideas out there and seeing what results. And the maddening thing is, I feel like both of these elements of advice are, completely accurate and valid. And I think the biggest obstacle that I've faced as someone who's been growing up in this political environment, who's really trying to find where I fit, what I want to advocate for, etc., beyond just respectful dialogue. It's been very difficult finding that balance and really seeing like, okay, where do I jump in and just start, advocating for something? And where do I sit back? Where do I listen? Where do I just explore? I think that something Brian said earlier might be a good way to start to integrate these two ideas. And I think this goes back to our conversation on the debates as well. And that's maybe engaging in discussions, debates, etc., where you're defending a certain point of view, but doing it with an eye towards some common solution, some common ground that you can actually find that's tangible, and really just see where you end up. You're not starting with some conclusion that you've, generated from, I don't know, just some partisan bias, and all you're doing is trying to defend that or score the partisan points, etc. You're really willing to grow throughout the process of discussion. So yeah, I think that's kind of the integrated advice that I'm getting here, what I'm going to try my best to implement, but we'll see how well it goes.
Okay,
So if I
well,
could,
there
Jeff,
you go. This is
really
Ruben.
yeah.
You've got something to say.
Yes, really quickly. Yes,
Good.
Just related to what Sam just said, because about a couple months ago, I realized that I was saying something that sounded contradictory. So I had to sort through this and explain how it wasn't contradicting myself. And I want the students to be thoughtful, but also jump into the arena. I don't want them to be so thoughtful that they never jump. And here's an example. I'm just putting myself into it. So there's a topic floating around right now. Every day I'm the topics to write about, right? And Pete Hegseth, the nominee for defense secretary, has said that he doesn't believe in that women should be in combat roles. So we're suddenly having this old debate about women in combat. Now, I've never been in the military and I'm not a woman. So when I jump into this, and I probably will, I have to tread carefully. Unless I'm the most arrogant, full of shit person you've ever met, that I think I can jump into a discussion having never served in the military and not being a woman. If I can just jump in the way I sometimes will see panels on Meet the Press of all white or black people saying, "Oh, so what about the Latino vote?"
and they're never struck by the irony. They just jump right in and give an opinion. Or a bunch of men. Let me tell you what I think about abortion, right? As men. So Sam, I don't want you to fall into the trap of jumping into a subject that's beyond your depth, because it's about, like abortion, it's about something that you can't relate to, you can't understand. So I don't want you to charge right into that. But I do want you to understand the issue in 360 and not be afraid to come into it respectfully. Maybe the way you do that is by calling up a friend of yours who is a woman who's been in combat, who's been in the military, who's, in ROTC now, and asking for that opinion. And then you write it that way. It was like the day I was writing about something related to the gay community, and I sent it to my editor at the Washington Post, and she said, you know what, as a straight guy, this is not right for you. Now my brother's gay, right? I have a gay brother. And so she said, do I have to really explain this to you? Call your brother. So I called my brother. I interviewed my brother. I wrote a column from his point of view. I had to take the arrogance down, several clicks. To think that as a straight man, I'm not equipped to be able to handle this issue, so I'm going to call my gay brother and have him walk me through it. The result was a good column, right? So if it sounds like mixed messages, I want you to understand it is not up to you, Sam, to solve the crisis in the Middle East. It is not. Many generations have tried and failed. It's not on your shoulders to do that. But I do want you to feel comfortable opining on that subject, as long as you do it respectfully, thoughtfully, having looked at the issue from a 360 perspective. It can be done. Somewhere between running in like Pete Hegseth, like a bull in a china shop, opining as a man, right? As if he were an expert on women in combat when he's not, and being in the stands paralyzed because you don't want to participate. Somewhere in the middle of those two things where you need to be.
Yeah.
Well
said and heard, Ruben. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Question for you. With ONC, the current hiring process, is there anyone who did not attend college who is an expert or one of the young advisors? The reason I bring this up is because there can be a perceived elitism with conservative, liberal, and moderate views, in which case any thoughtful plan of action or conversation we have can be misconstrued unless we engage with this other set of individuals. And, that's the point I was bringing up earlier with just being in a Rust Belt state and just seeing things happen in these election cycles. And, there is a majority of the population, which is, although I think the parties have their own sort of viewpoints and so forth, I think that there can be a better way to engage, and I think ONC can do a better job of that.
You're talking about something that I take very personally. I think we should do a much better job of reaching out to non-college attendees, but it's hard to do. There are all these electronic bulletin boards where you can put a job posting on Handshake or Chegg.com or all these other sites, and the college students know about these places, and they go to these places, and they know how to click one button, and 2 seconds later you've got a resume to look at. I don't know that the people who don't go to college have the same level of support. If there's something out there that's similar, that would be something good for us to know about. I personally think people who work in trades are often very smart. They're very practical. They do things I can't do. I wouldn't even try to fix a broken faucet or, an electrical plug that's not working. I'd rather call somebody who knows what the hell they're doing. And I'm happy to pay them because that's what makes the world go around, is just fixing things, building things, making things. I think America needs to get back to that more. So thank you, Brian. We'll take that into consideration. But right now, it's time to wrap it up. And let me just say, first of all, though, you're all just too darn reasonable. Too darn reasonable. When you listen to the ones when the conservative friends, they were gleeful. I talked to them just days after the election. They were having more fun than you can possibly imagine. My liberal friends were quite depressed. You guys are just very reasonable. And with that, we'll call it a day. And then in the future, we're going to get you all together in the same Zoom room, Riverside room, and we're going to see if we can build some bridges here. So that's what our national conversation is all about. We'll keep you posted on that. Thank you, Sam.
Good.
Yeah, and thank you to all our guests.
This podcast was brought to you by Our National Conversation, a place where students generate policy solutions to the biggest problems facing America. Join us in freeing political dialogue from hyperpartisanship. To learn more about what you heard today, check us out at ournationalconversation.org. You can also follow us on social media at Our National Conversation to show your support and keep up with our latest efforts.